What do you think of when I say the word witch? Is it an evil warty crone with a pointy hat and a black cat in tow? Or are you 8 years old and watching Charmed, Bewitched or Harry Potter for the 1000th time? They're cool, they're stylish, they're sexy, and you kind of want to be them. But just a few hundred years ago, being called a witch was a death sentence. We go from the witch trials to the Wizards of Waverly Place. It's the story of terror and hysteria, of sexuality and satanic panic. It's the story of women and power and the fear it strikes in the heart of those who seek to control them. With one final question. Once upon a time, witches were thought to be the literal agents of the devil. It's 1591, and a woman named Agnes Sampson is about to be strangled and burned at the stake. The former midwife was accused of spending a Halloween night dancing and singing until the devil appeared, kissing his ass literally, attaching parts of a dead man to a cat and sinking it in the sea. She of course confessed to all of these after hours of torture. Tragic, but not surprising given the place and time. Here's Agnes. Sure, there's a cloak, but it's not black. The hat, it isn't pointy. And that collar, not exactly the image of a witch. Slowly but surely from this point, the image of a witch starts to come together. Black cloaks were in fashion for women for much of the 17th century. Then there's the hat. The Quakers allowed women to be preachers. Men who were scandalised by this began to spread rumours about Quaker women being witches. And what did Quaker women wear? Now the wart. One of the signs that someone was a witch was the devil's mark. What is a devil's mark? Basically anything you want it to be. Warts, moles, or even simple blemishes would do. As if by magic, the image of a witch is born. In fact, this only became more common as witches moved from the printed page to the silver screen. Early cinema took the image of the witch and sought to honour it as faithfully as possible. The success of films like Oz and Snow White meant they stuck around in our cultural memories for a very long time. In fact, they never really left, but it didn't take long to be usurped by another version of witch that was altogether different. Men have controlled Hollywood pretty much ever since the first film cameras came to California. So how would they react when women started to gain power by joining the workforce in World War II and through feminism in the 60s? Not well. They tried to put women in their place, and one of the ways they did this was with witch stories. Gone was the old crone. The mid-century witch was often a beautiful woman who had uncontrollable power over men. Until men managed to control that power by putting a ring on it. Consider Bewitched, the classic TV show where a beautiful witch marries a mortal man, sacrificing her wild life for domestic drudgery. Or I Married a Witch, where Veronica Lake plays the ultimate time-travelling enchantress, seeking revenge on those who burned her at the stake. At the end of the film, she enacts her revenge by marrying the man whose ancestors persecuted her and having his children. Obviously. Whilst lower budget films still tended to opt for the more conventional, wild, wicked witch, Hollywood was smitten with the sexy, domesticated version. But then people started taking it a bit too seriously.
A fantasy game that's something of a cross between a hobby and a cult.
But does it get into their minds and does it grip them?
Well, only totally.
But eventually the world would wake up from its satanic panic and seem ready to laugh at all the hysteria it had created. A new generation of witches was born. The witches on screen we've seen so far have been male-centric power fantasies. So surely a female equivalent would be on the way at some point. They would, but it took them decades to get there. Louise is an awkward high schooler, a social outcast with dreams of popularity and dating the hot quarterback. But that all changes on her 16th birthday when she inherits magical powers. Suddenly, she can make bad dates disappear, inflict revenge on her teachers, and declare herself the coolest girl in school. But it all ends with her realizing the best magic you can have is the power of self-belief. It might be wrapped up in a typical American teen tropes, but Louise's journey to witchhood is an occult metaphor for her journey to womanhood. Teen Witch was one of the first movies to make witchcraft feel empowering, making it a celebration of identity and stepping into your own powers. And once that cat was out of the bag, a whole generation of empowered witches emerged. It's time for the modern icons to take to the stage. Reclaiming the metaphor of Teen Witch for their own ends, these shows inspired a generation of witchy young women with Y2K aesthetics and a no shit attitude. Witches are aspirational now, and aside from being cooler than you'll ever be, they redefined who could be a witch. Willow and Tara's relationship in Buffy was the queer stuff of dreams, even if, spoiler, they didn't get the ending they deserved. And The Craft gave us one of mainstream Hollywood's first black witches with Rachel True's Rochelle. Empowered, sexy and stylish, these girls were miles from the thinly veiled, cautionary tales of the mid-20th century. Even when they were bad, we loved them for it. So at this point, we might be tempted to gather around the cauldron and rejoice with our coven, but we aren't done yet. As we headed into the 2010s, the sisterhood expanded. Sabrina got a reboot fit for the streaming age, and The Craft came back to our screens with the first transgender witch. And of course, American Horror Story's glamorous melanated coven built an entire society with its own rules and rituals. From cloaks to couture, what's next for witches? Our final stop is perhaps the last place you'd expect to find witches, Manchester city centre. In 2024, there's no place more perfect for the modern witch than the streets of Manchester. Like the city, modern witch shows are cauldrons of culture inspired by hundreds of years of history from across the world.
You're doing something to humans. But you don't want to be. I feed off of others. What am I?
You're a witch. I'm a witch too.
Humans and witches can never make it work.
Cursed and on the run, Domino Day is a witch who must fight her own fears to unlock her true powers. The multicultural coven she encounters along the way is an eclectic mix of practices, inspired by the history of Wicca, pagan and Obeah witches.
You can't feel the danger you're in? It's bigger than you know.
This mix is important because Domino herself straddles the line between various worlds. Her desire to belong is a big reason women are attracted to the mysticism of magic in the first place. Witchcraft has been a metaphor for identity before. Teen Witch used it to empower cliched societal norms like popularity and getting the quarterback. 35 years later, and the witches of shows like Domino Day spell out a vision of identity that is rooted in freedom to live the way you want. It's been a long journey from the witch trials to witch talk, but the story of witches on TV and film is only just beginning.